Hey everyone, welcome back to Unleash the Service Dog Gals. Today we are talking about who gets to decide what a real service dog is. Are you guys confused? Because we are too. So, Bridget and I have been digging into accreditation, who gets to decide, and my goodness, we are probably just as confused as you. The more we read, the more we're learning about how the system is very patchwork in Canada. And even in the States, while anyone can certify, they don't have to. It's very confusing. So we're going to dive into it. We're going to try and clear some of it up today. And we'd love to hear from you if you've experienced some of the confusion within the industry. You're trying to certify, you don't know where to go. Send us your questions. We'd love to hear from you.
I really just want to kind of get into what you experienced on the front lines because you were on the front lines and you got to experience what accreditation looks like, what standards look like. So I just want to hear more about what you got going on.
Yeah, when I think of who gets to decide what a real service dog is, from my experience and my entry into this, it was Assisted Dogs International. And working for a service dog agency, I was able to see why those standards are there and why they get to decide and why it's important to have these dogs adhere to these standards so that they're safe in public. And so for my introduction was Assisted Dogs International. And just a brief background on Assisted Dogs International, they started in the States. They were able to set out standards for service dogs to adhere to. And then they ended up coming to Canada and sharing those standards. And any nonprofit dog organization can apply to be ADI accredited. So Assisted Dogs International, for short, ADI. And my thing is that when I was working towards getting our dog as a facility dog, I learned very quickly who gets to decide who a service dog is. Well, if you're not with a nonprofit organization, there wasn't really an answer. It's you're trying to find out, can I get in with there? Can you test my dog? And that's where I started to really unpack that only nonprofit dog organizations can test their dog to these service dog standards and to certify. If you're not with that, then there's not too many options. Standards are really important to me because I saw the work that they did. I wanted to do it similar. I want it in. Test my dog. Please give me an opportunity. And I feel like other people, there are incredible trainers out there doing freelance and independent dogs, but they're not able to test. So what do they do when they're not able to do that?
So question then,
Yeah.
Can I just be clear on this? So ADI then is accrediting the individual dog or the organization and their training process?
ADI is accrediting the organization, that it's a sound organization training service dogs. You meet certain eligibility criteria, it's nonprofit, and then that organization has trainers that can test the dogs to confirm or deny that they meet ADI standards. They do a test, it's called the public access test, known as the PAT test. And that's what they go through. And then when they pair the dog with the organization, they have the backing that they are ADI accredited. So it means that they've come from an accredited school who is partnered with Assisted Dogs International. Again, it was in Canada, we don't have any regulation, but this was a way through Assisted Dogs International to have consistent standards for nonprofits. But for those individuals, how do you get to decide what a real service dog is and who gets to decide?
You said something that just kind of sparked my brain about how like we don't have a lot of laws here in Canada to protect service dogs. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if you're familiar with, I could be saying the name wrong, Quinto or Quanto's law, but this was, I want to say 2016, 2018, in and around there. It's been on the books for a while, but this was a law that came out that if you hurt a service dog or a police dog, you could be criminalized.
I didn't know the name of it, but yes, I have heard about that.
Yeah. It's a very interesting law. I mean, it's a little obviously separate from what we're talking about here, but it's interesting how we are seeing laws explicitly come out that are for working dogs.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I think most of the laws I've looked at and whatnot, I've seen they do tend to center like the companion animals, the working animals versus other broad ranged animals. But so we do see some movement, and it seems positive in the way of working animals. So
Yeah, and I mean, Canada, they try to streamline it. They try to get, so it, for anyone that's listening, if you don't know, in the States, there are laws protecting service dogs. And there are ways that people can test, whether it's through a nonprofit organization, whether it's for profit, freelance, individual trainer. They all have access to take this test to say yes or no, they meet standards for a service dog. We don't have that in Canada. There were some amazing organizations that tried to lobby for it. It got pretty far, but then was dissolved, I think, 214 or 216, something around there. And so when that happened, other provinces started to come out with their own regulations and their own ways to test service dogs.
so we talked about standards kind of equaling public access testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like from what I understand of ADI, they have a summary of standards that they let out for their organizations. So they have standards for their breeding programs, standards for their training programs. So it's not just standards of like, does this dog achieve these standards, but it's how the standards exist for how do we get the dog to
the dog's health. Yeah. Does this dog have allergies? Does the dog have hip dysplasia? So it's not just standards in the form of training. There's a lot of other ones that go into it, which help to create these robust programs that when you do have a service dog that has certified, they also have been health checked.
That's big.
Right. And then also there's support that they give the programs that they give the dogs to. And that's why having that organization is so nice, because then people can go back to it with which some of the individualized programs, how much can you go back to them for ongoing support? You have the dog. It's been, probably won't be certified if it's in Canada, but in, again, different provinces like BC or the States. So it's been certified. But now what? Are you able to go back if there's any issues? Are you able to have them help you implement the program? Who do you go to? And through ADI or even through courthouse dogs, that's why those organizations are incredible for the nonprofits, because they're offering guidance and ongoing guidance, not just here's the dog, yes, you passed, the dog passed, see you later. Good luck, best of luck to you. No, they want to see it through. They want this to be a success. They want, when that name is on it, to be professionalized.
Well, because I mean, it's interesting to me because, you know, maintenance. We're both trainers, right?
Yes.
And we know that training doesn't just stop. Like training requires maintenance.
Yeah.
Just like I use the joke, and my students in my classes might recognize this, but it's just like working out, right? Just because you could lift 100 pounds a year ago, if you never touched a weight, you won't be able to lift 100 pounds anymore. So it's like this ongoing process of maintaining those skills throughout, which is a hard task behind the scenes. But
and there's almost so like capacity. How much capacity do you have to offer that ongoing support? Because as a trainer, we always knew that we were getting the dog to the best standard because we're trainers. We know what we're doing. So we're going to get that dog to be, for when you're going through the public access test, you know it's responding, you know it's doing well. Now, when you get it with a handler, they're a handler. So you're putting them through very intense training. They come and do team training. It's very intense. It's very long, anyone that's been through it. But there's going to be regressions, and we know that because there's a human involved that isn't a trainer and hasn't maybe had experience with dogs. So that's a piece of it, and why having these backing of Courthouse Dogs or Assisted Dogs International is so important, so that there is a way that you can come back and say, I'm struggling with this. And then they'll typically will send their trainers out to help.
Yeah, that was huge. Like, right? Trainers actually travel out.
And they want to protect their program. Yeah. So when you have the individualized programs, how are we protecting that? Because here's the other piece of it is that in Canada, we have really high standards in the sense that after their certification through, again, BC or assisted dogs or ones where you can certify, say that there is a certification, they have to recertify every year. Most of it's every year, but there are some that are every 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like psychiatric support typically requires a yearly recertification.
Yeah, so you got to keep the update, the practice, and that's why if you're having a lot of, if the handler's having a lot of issues, they want to protect their program and the integrity of it. They'll send the trainers out to help, or they'll offer phone calls and things like that.
Yeah.
But in absence of not having those streamlined standards or way to certify, how do we make sure there's continued adherence? So someone pays for a private trainer to train the dog and they say, yes, it's good to go. It adheres to standards. How do you keep that? How do you keep the integrity of your program? And if you're a program out there, those are questions to consider.
And what are their standards? I have the, ADI standards in front of me, and one standard that they have written in here is standards for dog training and behavior, and that organization, volunteers, staff, and clients are not permitted to utilize shock collars, prong collars, or collars made fully of chain on any dog at any time for any reason.
Yes, that is. I'm so happy you brought that up. I did, because sometimes I have the information in my head and I just keep going.
Yeah.
But that is so important to note, is that when we're saying adhering to the standards, you have to adhere to it within the ethical frameworks as well. So no prongs, no shocks. You're not using any of those things in training.
So this is, and I know, dog training methods is a highly contentious topic, yes, and I don't necessarily want to get into that, but we have these standards that are being created by these organizations for nonprofits, and then owner trainers creating their own standards. So where are these standards coming from? Who's getting to determine these individual organizations? Like maybe a balance trainer who does use prongs would not adhere to these standards that are in ADI, right? Mm-hmm. Because they don't align with the methods, so to speak.
So if you're a trainer and the dog is doing the PAT, the public access test, and it's successful, but it has a prong collar, then it's not. If you look at ADI, if you look at standards, if you look at international standards, those are not allowed.
Yeah.
You have to have, quote unquote, control of the service dog.
Verbal.
Yes. And cooperative relationship. That's part of the test, is seeing how you guys work together. Is the dog in tune to you? Not is the dog fearful of something that's going to hurt them, so they're complying. Fear compliance.
I mean, it's the age-old thing that I always talk about, the right to work versus the duty to work. Mm-hmm. Do these dogs want to work? Do they have a choice to work, whether or not? Versus are they kind of being, controlled in as a worker?
Yeah.
So it's interesting because, the standards are out there, but if these individual organizations are creating their own standards, we might see a shift away from this as we see more different training methodologies being prioritized in the standardized training of owner trainers. So
which is why having that national standard is so important, because then you're saying, no, it cannot have these collars or these methods, or it's not going to work out. You're not going to get certified, because Canada has such a high caliber of making sure these dogs are good throughout their entire career. They are still meeting those standards. They are still safe for the public. You still have that beautiful relationship. And I think that would be valuable anywhere.
And I definitely agree. I think it's, one of the struggles, I think, in the disability community with service dogs is this notion of fake service dogs, right? Mm-hmm. And the joke, I've been out in public with legitimately trained service dogs who didn't have that notable organizational, that nonprofit organization vest on, but they were trained to standards. And the dog was performing and doing exceptionally well, but people were, walking by. Is that a real service dog?
And in the States, it's really interesting, because in the States, you can legally only ask 2 questions of the service dog. And I want to get these correct. But the 2 questions are, is the service animal required because of a disability? Second question, what work or task has the dog been trained to perform? Because service dogs have tasks.
That's the difference.
That's the difference. You can have a lovely dog and be like, oh, my dog can make a service dog. It also has to be task trained for a specific purpose. What is the disability it is mitigating with that task?
That's the big difference between having just a patio dog who does great in the public.
Yeah.
But a service dog has those tasks. I think it's interesting in that regard because I don't think anybody disagrees that service dogs are essential disability partners. They do exceptional work. But we always have to remember with public access has to be balanced with safety, with the behavior, with public safety.
Yeah.
There's children out there.
And exactly.
And this all comes down to, like, the reason why this is important is public safety. Without these standards, public is at risk. There's children out there, right? There's other animals out there, wildlife. There's so much happening out there. And if the dog, your service dog, can't handle this type of work appropriately, you're also at risk. I was just talking about this with someone the other day. Like, you know, kids are going to wear like lights on their shoes and they're going to have squeaky stuff around them and they're going to move erratically, right? And we have an obligation to keep them safe in public.
If there is a dog, whether it has a recognized vest, whether it doesn't, if it's not behaving in public, if it's unsafe for people around them, it can be asked to leave. Regardless, are you a service dog or a fake service dog or whatever, if it is not safe, if it's barking, if it's reactive, or even excited, like going up to everyone, that's not a service dog because it's not working with the person. And in the States, that's one of the big things that they really talk about is you have to be able to see whether it's a credited or it's a freelance, the dog has to be safe and in control in public, and that's one of the big markers of it. Yeah.
For me, I think like one of the things I don't love that people are out there policing service dogs. I think that it's stressful enough for people to go out there. So when people are like, is that a real service dog? Is it not? I think just give people space. This isn't our problem to solve in that moment.
And right? I think the States offers that with just having, again, that regulatory, the federal law,
the
right?
Standard.
Yes, exactly. And then people have those two questions that they can ask. But is the dog behaving appropriately? And if they're not, okay, yes, there's more room for question. I think it should be questioned because it puts other dogs that are doing the real work at risk.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about international standards, rules, once they become inconsistent, and we have a very patchworky standards across international borders, but it creates barriers for legitimate handlers.
It does. I wonder if it's different. I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder if it's different in Canada, if there's more policing, we would say, of dogs because we don't have the federal law or national standard.
The research I looked at was U.S. based, and it's true that the less standards there are, the more policing.
Also, organizations, employees don't have that language where, again, when it's a national standard, they know these are the two things I can ask as a manager with a dog in my store, and it's either behaving in a respectful way, it's safe, or it's not. I'm going to ask those two questions. But when you don't have those national standards, then I think that it opens more room for judgment.
More judgment, more discrimination, more all of those things we really don't want.
Right, which is why Canada having a national standard is still something to push for.
I think now's a good time to push for it because, in my work in animal law, like we are seeing a lot of movement with animal laws coming up. We're seeing good conversations happening in legislative places. We're seeing a lot more laws that have passed recently that wouldn't have in previous times. So I think sometimes it just comes down to the timing and the political will. Right? And I think
if you work at anything enough, you just keep going until you find your yes, and it might take a decade. It might take 2 decades, you know?
But laws are hard to change.
Yes.
They're hard. So hard.
Change is hard for anyone.
We work in behavior. We know.
Exactly.
So my interest in this, like I do a lot of regulatory and accountability stuff in the work I do. And I'm so interested in the sense of like this Assistance Dog International, they are the gold standard, right? Like this is what the gold standard seems
I think
to
it's
be.
why they started in the States and came to Canada, right? Why they've been so successful. And I think it's an incredible system. It just needs to be expanded, like to include individual trainers that are very capable, such as myself, such as other people that are doing it, that have the same dedication, unwavering dedication to standards.
These are just questions popping into my head. I'm a critical sociologist. Sorry, guys. But like, who's on? You know, who is Assistance Dog International? Who are the people making it up? What qualifies them to make those decisions? Right? Is there conflict of interest? I'm not saying that any of this is true, but these are just questions about when we're talking about standards. Because can I today just pop open and say, okay, I've got Megan Bridget's Assistance Dogs owner trainer, accreditation process. But who are we? I mean, we know who we are, but who are we to decide what that looks like for owner trainers?
Oh,
I'm getting philosophical here.
You a philosopher. Now, I think all these organizations, Assisted Dogs International, Courthouse Dogs, Justice Dogs, any of the nonprofit agencies, PADS, National Service Dogs, Guide Dogs, they all start with an idea and a well-intended thought to professionalize and standardize. And Courthouse Dogs, Justice Dogs, Assisted Dogs was able to grow that and get acceptance and professionalizes themselves.
The reason I ask these questions, because I go back to, ADI standards of prong collars, right? I don't use prongs. I don't use e-collars in my training. But I see, there's a segue in for people to question it.
I think you get enough recognition. You advocate for yourself. You advocate for why it's important to have, I keep using the word standards, but standards for training, as you said, standards for the breeding of the dog, the temperament of the dog, the medical history of the dog, when the support post placement, having access to trainers, having the ability to career change a dog, all these things. And when you can advocate and you can show that there is a gap and that you are filling it, but not only filling it, being successful in that, I think that's how you get to decide. Yeah. And I think we are all, a lot of us in this field are in agreement on the standards and on that public access test and on the the tasks. It's just making it a national standard wherever you go
for all services,
for everyone,
not just nonprofit.
Yeah, so if ADI could figure out a way to let other people in to decide who this real service dog is, they have that foundation because they've worked very hard to build it, and it was built on an idea and an interest, and they've been able to professionalize themselves.
I would love to see something happen here in Canada where it was not a patchwork of provincial legislations, or standards and regulations, but more a federal standard.
A federal standard like they do in the States, but the States with that, wide access to it, but then you do it once and you're done. But Canada is doing something really awesome with the recertification. Now, I know that's a lot for capacity.
Yeah.
Canada has it there. We just don't have broad access.
So who gets to decide? Anyone. Right now, yeah, until we have some national standard. Right. Yeah, which would be lovely. It would be lovely if ADI could figure out how to, translate that to include everyone. So everyone gets to have a test. Maybe trainers are able to have a test. They have a similar idea going on or similar framework in Australia.
Where framework.
Yeah, where trainers do have to prove that they can train service dogs, and then everyone can certify. You get the opportunity, which I think that's what folks are looking for, is the opportunity to show that they can do it. And then I think that does help manage the ones that are out of control. Yeah. Because then we can say, yeah, they are certified. We have this national standard. We tested them to it.
And here we are.
But it's a lot harder than that. It would be lovely if there was an option. So right now,
I would say, yes, who gets to decide? It's very unclear, and it's very much a patchwork system here in Canada. It's a lot more of a national standard in the States, but it still leaves room for kind of do whatever you want, unfortunately. So I would say if you're looking to train a service dog, do your research, find the organizations, find what they have done. How do they have these dogs out there? Are they successful dogs? Are there any negative things? Can we speak to people that you've trained? Maybe. I think there are ways that you can vet. And yeah.
And a big part of that is, are they accountable to someone? Right? Or are they just doing it their own and printing off a certificate or something off of their home printer and being like, yes, you're a service dog?
It's very easy to access this stuff online, guys. So take a look what a public access test is, take a look what those standards are, and see if that organization is, I would say, almost mimicking it, because that's really what you want. You want to be able to have the dog in public and behaving in a certain manner. They're in alignment with what those national standards are, whether it's the States, Australia, or through Assisted Dogs International, courthouse dogs, justice dogs. Take that information, compile it, and see if that individual organization is trying to align themselves with it. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I think that's big. We know that there are some really good standards, and part of the issue is that those standards aren't generalized out to beyond a certain organization. But you've hit it on the head there, that those standards are accessible. So why can't other organizations start modeling it after these organized ADI who's been around forever?
There's a lot of ADI trainers that have left the organization and are freelance now. They still can train to the same standards. So that's what I'm saying, is look at what they're doing. Is it mimicking what really most of those leading organizations are doing? The same thing. So let's try and mirror it. We don't have a national standard in Canada yet. That's okay. Let's figure out a way to do it successfully, adhering to standards, recertification, and not using aversive measures.
So who gets to decide? Anyone.
Right now, yeah. Until we have some national standard.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Join us on another episode. We actually thought it would be pretty cool to dive in and learn a bit more about each other. I hope you guys are interested, just so you know who we are. So next episode, we're going to be diving into Megan.
You're Megan.
I was going to say Bridget but I was like, wait, we already released that.
I honestly love that. That you did that. I hope this stays in.
Oh, no, that's embarrassing. Okay, we're talking about me.
Well, it's always awkward to talk about yourself.
Tune in.